Here we're going to look at a relatively new feature of Excel called Sparklines. And these are similar to conditional formatting in that Excel will look at some data and automatically generate kind of a mini graphic to go along with our data. The only difference is that Sparklines will look at the values in multiple cells, whereas conditional formatting typically looks at formats on a cell-by-cell basis. So that'll make more sense as we dig into it. Here we've got some sample data for a fictional company. In Q1, we see the different revenue for each department. So hardware, software, auditing, consulting, and investments. We got some negative numbers there in investments for quarters 1, 2, and 3, but a positive number in Q4, so they redeemed themselves a little bit. And let's say we want to include kind of like a miniature chart here in column F to represent this data. So I am going to click the column Sparkline. The data range will be quarters 1, 2, 3, and 4 for hardware, and click OK. And now I can see I've got this chart here basically representing the 4 quarters, and I'm going to copy that down. So let's take a look at this. We can see that revenue is going up for quarters 1, 2, and 3, and then went down in Q4. For software, we were down in the Q2, up in the Q3. So this is allowing us, for our analysis, to compare within each department which quarters were the best. So I can see my investments, definitely Q4 was the best. Now, looking at this, we can see that maybe this isn't the ideal way to represent this data. If we just look at the hardware Sparkline, Q4, just look at how tall that Sparkline is. That's about the same height as consulting's Q4. It's just a very thin line. But the revenue for hardware was 40 million. The revenue for consulting was 6 million. So this is maybe not ideal. So I'm going to select all these Sparklines. And to change the formatting, we're going to go to the Design tab, open up Design. Now we have a bunch of different options just for these Sparklines. We can change the type. What we want to do here is change the axis. The horizontal axis is fine. The vertical axis minimum, let's change it, make it the same for all Sparklines. And let's do the same thing for the maximum value. So what is that going to do for us? Now we can actually compare the trends across the different departments. Still tricky to see those negative values there. If I click that negative points, I can see more clearly which of these values are below 0, which can be helpful, especially when you have losses here. Now I can compare across the different units to show that, okay, well, my hardware in Q4, 40 million was, good sized bar. Consulting is still pretty small. Consulting doesn't appear to be a huge portion of our revenue. So that's why those lines are small. So it depends what you want to represent. If you just want to show each department's performance over time, you would want to use automatic axes for each Sparkline. But if you want to compare across those departments, you would want to use the same axes for all Sparklines. There's no one correct way to do it. It all depends on what you're trying to represent. But Sparklines make it easy and effective to include some visual representations of your data that will be adjusted as the data changes. It's kind of like having mini charts occupying these cells.